Today's bootcamp on responsible AI is being conducted in partnership with Citizen Digital Foundation, a nonprofit that's working to promote safe and responsible navigation and innovation in the digital ecosystem. So over the next 75 minutes of this bootcamp, you will have an opportunity to hear from Nidhi Sudhan, who is the co-founder of Citizen Digital Foundation, on the importance of tech governance and building responsible applications. We will also have two young developer advocates who will be joining Nidhi for an interactive question and answer session, following which we will get into a practical bootcamp on how we can build a AI-powered fake news detection engine. So with that introduction of today's agenda, I'd like to welcome Nidhi Sudhan, who is joining us from Trivandrum today. She is the co-founder of Citizen Digital Foundation and has a near 17-year background in content, editorial, and brand across media. Hi, Nidhi. Welcome to today's session.
Hi, Shweta. Thank you very much for having me.
It's lovely to have you in our session, and through my interactions with you over the last couple of months, it's really exciting to see the work that you're doing in the space and what you're advocating for as part of Citizen Digital Foundation in the importance of responsible application development, which I think is very relevant in what's happening in today's world. So look forward to hearing from you, and over to you, Nidhi.
Thank you very much, Smita. A very warm hello to everyone who's attending this session from whichever part of the world. I am really happy that OpenWeaver has initiated this discourse for responsible AI, especially within business. And I believe there's a student and business community joining us today. I am Nidhi Sudhan. I run Citizen Digital Foundation out of Trivandrum, Kerala, and we are trying to advocate responsible technology as well as information literacy among end users. So without much ado, let me start. And I believe my screen's visible. Let me throw some numbers at you. As such, these numbers might not make sense. These are numbers that were shared by Frances Haugen, who, as we know, was the Facebook whistleblower. And let me just put some context to what these numbers mean. 87% of Facebook's operational budget for misinformation, Frances Haugen points out, is spent on the English version of the platform, whereas only 9% of the users speak English. And 13% of the time spent by Facebook's disinformation moderators are on countries outside the US of A. So let those stats sink in as I introduce the rest of the topic. Internet and digital media, as we know, has been one of the biggest and most powerful and potent innovations of our times. It has propelled humanity towards unforeseen growth, development, expression, freedom of speech, to connect with people from across the world and conduct business like never before, and seen economies grow and given voice to people who've never had a platform to voice their concerns and issues before. But like any other big innovation, it has also come up with a lot of fallouts. There are socioeconomic fallouts, and some of these circles that you see on the screen might be familiar to you. They might even resonate personally with some of you. It's not because technology is created with the intention of causing harm, but it's because how technology tends to get used, misused by various entities with various vested interests that often these fallouts happen. Now, it is not debatable that we need technology and innovation for human evolution, but historically, we've also had several examples of how big innovations and inventions have required a safety valve or a course correction or an alternative. Let's look at a few examples. We know that for motor vehicles, it wouldn't make sense to have them without brakes and, of course, seat belts, which happened, I believe, about 80 to 90 years after the invention of the combustion engine, and road rules, which put order into the whole chaos of how we use motor vehicles. Same with flying. Without air traffic control, there would be absolute chaos. Fossil fuel has to be the loudest example here, and how industries over the last decade or over the last century have used it, and the impact that it has had on the planet and climate are loud enough for all of us to now notice, and therefore the need for it to be replaced by renewable energy, and that's not even an option for us anymore. Nuclear power, when it was invented, it was definitely not with the objective of obliterating entire populations, but it did. And which is why countries and nations have got together and continue to try and work out solutions and codes of conduct or regulation around how nuclear energy is being used. Meet Joy Buolamwini. She, if you already know, that's great. She has pointed out that we have entered the age of automation overconfident yet underprepared. Now, she's this MIT researcher and also founder of Algorithmic Justice League, whose research and study pointed out the discrepancies in some of the world's biggest facial recognition technologies that are curated by some of the biggest companies. And what are those discrepancies? Basically, facial recognition software and the data that is fed into it, or the training data sets, are largely trained on majority of the population. Therefore, it tends to more accurately read lighter male faces than the other extreme, which is darker female faces, which means Black women, brown women, Asian women often do not get read right. And Buolamwini had this experiment where her own face was not being read by I think one of the biggest FRTs. And when she put on a white mask, that's when it would read her face. So now a lot of people would think that how does this really affect us? How does this play out? What happens is when such data, and yes, some of these FRT data are provided to law enforcement agencies in other countries. And when this data gets fed into how law is enforced or how it is enacted, who gets convicted, who gets, who is released, all that gets influenced by how AI pronounces certain things. And this is not just law enforcement, but also academics, or real estate or housing loans, education loans, and hospital treatments, how we receive our healthcare. All this, as we progress into using AI to disseminate these services in order to achieve efficiency and larger scale of access and empowerment, we must also understand that all these biases that are there in the society, which get fed into AI, will also exacerbate the same divides at a much larger and much more irreversible scale, so to speak. Now, when we talk about using responsible AI or introducing ethical AI, risk harm assessment protocols into organizations, we often come across some arguments or assumptions like technology is neutral, or we are just giving users what they want, or some collateral damage is natural. When we talk about collateral damage, we always think about somebody who's underprivileged or undereducated, and they are the ones who do not know how to use technology, therefore they end up paying the price for it. But net, technology has been doing good, so that's how we see it. But we often forget that each of us individually are part of the collateral damage. And things like who are we to decide, or democratization of tech actually gives everyone a voice. Or one of my favorite ones, which is governance stifles innovation. This is usually said in the context that governance is regulation and regulation only, but I'll address that in the coming slides. And these are what Center for Humane Technology calls binary assumptions, where we tend to look at things in just black and white. We don't understand that there are nuanced, complex, sophisticated socioeconomic dialogues and psychology and sociology that goes into play to disseminate these technologies the way we build it. So we need to step out of these binary arguments to address some of these challenges and to be able to pick up responsible innovation from a holistic perspective. We won't be able to address each of them in this particular session, but let me just pick one. If you look at the argument that we are only giving users what they want, when we see an accident on the road, for instance, we naturally tend to crane our neck and look at it, right? Rubbernecking, as it is called. Is it because we really want to see the accident? It is actually a very, very basic human instinct of survival and self-preservation that makes us rubberneck and look at the accident, which is why we tend to also kind of gravitate towards violent, gory content at times. This is a very, very primal instinct. But does that mean that is what we should always watch? If that's the case, then somebody should be staging more accidents on the highways. But nobody does that, right? These are things that we want to avoid. Yet, we tend to see a lot of shocking, surprising, and seductive content online, along with all the productive and productive and healthy aspects that come with technology, we also tend to see a tilt towards distractive content, which is primarily psychological tactics that are built into business models to harvest our attention so that we spend more and more time online. Now, again, these are not done with vicious intentions, but they are having huge socioeconomic fallouts. This is Kathy O'Neill. She's a data scientist and the author of Weapons of Math Destruction. And she points out that if we place blind trust in algorithms, then we will tend to propagate some of the existing discriminatory patterns without even acknowledging any kind of intent. And that is a very, very potent statement to actually pay attention to. So the point I'm trying to make is that how end users get to use or experience technology is often dictated or determined by the businesses that create them. Yes, they are always listening to the customer. They're trying to get the customer's needs and demands into play. But still, we tend to focus on what is extractive than always what is in human interest, right? So there's a lot of decision and terms and conditions that are thrust upon end users only because we need these technologies to achieve the information, the connection, the commerce that we're trying to do online. And in turn, they are regulated by the government and the policies that are in place. There is often a back and forth between businesses and government on, the whole power of who has, the control over how the business pans out. But unfortunately, in this whole situation, the asymmetry of power basically leaves the end user at the least advantage. We have the least amount of participation in how technologies impact us. Yes, as a customer, we are heard, but there's a difference between how we get technologies in our interest versus actually we becoming a product or a user for the technology. Now, in an ideal, healthy society, this is how the components should actually look like. They should be balanced, and each of these entities should have an exchange of information. And each of them should have a participatory process in developing product solutions, non-tech, tech, whatever it is, so that it benefits the society and helps society come up equitably and not just have, power discrepancies in how the society develops. And classically, this is enabled by the media. Media is the one that provides, it includes search engines, it includes legacy media, and it includes all kinds of communication forms that we see, so that all these entities in a democratic country are able to interact in a way that they come up with governance protocols. And this is where I'd like to differentiate that governance is not just regulation. Regulation and soft law is only part of governance. Governance is a whole complex ecosystem as defined by OECD, which includes research and development, which includes technology assessment beforehand. It includes public engagement and communication, and design standards being put in place, and private sector governance and self-regulation. To put that simply, it means we should have preventive measures as well as reactive measures. What is preventive and reactive measures? In order to make sure that our technologies do not have large-scale damaging fallouts, we need to have preventive protocols that prevent things from taking a wrong course. And reactive is what are the protocols that would be put in place to be addressed when things go wrong. Yes, there will still be fallouts because we can't always predict every little detail of how things will pan out in the future. But when that happens, do we have reactive protocols in place to curtail them? We're moving from artificial intelligence to artificial general intelligence. As we know it in different terms, it's generative AI, it is synthetic AI, it is the singularity of AI. There are several words in the space for that. And this is another watershed moment that we are witnessing in technological development. To put how AI or AGI is being used in applications, we already know that OpenAI, for instance, has come up with an API for enterprise adoption of ChatGPT. Similarly, a lot of other, visual text to image and speech synthesis AI are being used by applications to provide the services that enterprises have already been doing. Let's take the example of search. A few weeks back, we saw two giants battle it out in who employs AI better to provide AI-powered search. And this is the classic moment when the innovator's dilemma happens. I'm not going to get into details of innovator's dilemma, but this is also the place where Collingridge's dilemma takes place. And this is a crucial argument that AI ethics puts forward. I don't want to, throw the jargon without any context here. Basically, Collingridge's dilemma is the concept that when we start out or see the development of a new technology, we do not or we cannot predict how it's going to pan out, or what the fallouts or what the consequences in future would be. However, we have the agility and the nimbleness at the beginning stages to be able to adapt or put processes and protocols in place. The costs are much lesser, the processes are much easier. Later on, when our knowledge of how the technology is actually impacting people is much more clearer, at that stage it becomes very difficult to turn around a ship and put protocols and systems into place. It becomes very costly for the business as well, which is why in the interest of having long term healthy bottom lines, it is advised that we put safety and yeah, AI governance and ethical harm assessment protocols much earlier in the process when we are adapting to newer technologies, and that's basically the understanding of it. Again, to boil it down in very, very simple layperson terms, why do we need tech governance? Basically, today we might get annoyed about why some ads are targeting us, or how the platforms are hearing what we're discussing with our friends. These are some of the fears that we often see. Later on, this could be about a job that we are being rejected for, or a home loan that's being denied, or a specific treatment at a specific hospital that we could not get access to, or perhaps we get wrongly persecuted for something, or even our children denied school admission. All this because we look a certain way, our caste, our gender, our religion, our income, or our parents' past records are feeding into a system certain information that actually is leading to this. Unfortunately, the biggest glitch here is that we won't be able to question or figure out why exactly this is happening unless there are transparency and explainability protocols being included into how AI systems are built, developed, and put out. So, which is why this becomes very necessary. And also keep in mind that however AI is going to execute these systems and processes, it's going to be a much more large scale and really, really a process where you won't be able to interrupt it with many questions if it's already in the running. So that is why it's extremely essential to have governance protocols much early on in the thing. Again, I believe there are a lot of students listening in and they might be wondering, these are really big problems. What exactly can I do about it? I'm a really small entity and, I'm just studying and I just want to get a job and do well in life and that's about it. But there are things, because you will be becoming a professional and a business person, or, influencing decisions in an organization very soon. So this is where you begin. Basically, start questioning those binary and popular assumptions. Is there more to it? Is there more nuance to the dialogue? Or, is there more complexities that are involved? Sorry. Actively build and innovate in human interests. Sometimes it's very easy to get carried away by the metrics that get you to work towards growth, engagement, and things like that. But always keep in mind that you're developing in human interest. Break the silos and echo chambers. It's essential that engineers talk to lawyers, talk to academicians, talk to sociologists, talk to agriculturalists. Everybody should be speaking to each other when you're developing a solution that is supposedly meant to serve the society. So it cannot be done in silos. Always remember that your business will have multiple stakeholders, and each of their takeaways or the values that they receive has to be considered. And it's not always about prioritizing the shareholders, although the current economic model kind of tilts towards that. We need to consider that stakeholders, if you follow the stakeholder value, the business will sustain in the long run. And that brings me to long-term economic returns, and short-term are always better than short-term profits. Just bringing you back to that earlier slide that I pointed, at the end of the day, if these stats have to change or at least be equalized, the non-English speaking users, the non-English speaking countries on the non-English speaking versions of these platforms have to take these decisions, have to call out. Most of the movements that we've seen in the past, like health movements or anti-tobacco movements were user driven. So unless we develop the critical intrigue to question some of these processes, they won't change. It's not in the business's incentive most of the time to make these changes, right? So we have to begin, and that leads very nicely into the segue here. We have a couple of students with us today who are building a fake news detection model, and I'm keen to hearing from them as well as any other questions. Those are our details and contacts. So yeah, let's have them on. Thank you very
Lovely.
much.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Nidhi. Really enjoyed that presentation, especially the examples that you shared on how and why it is so important to ensure that AI systems are developed and deployed and used in a responsible manner. So, thank you for
Thank
that. And as you said, we have two young developer enthusiasts who are joining us today and representing the OpenWeaver community of developers, as well as all of the other students who are participating today. I'd like to welcome and invite Parul Man and Anmol Jha, both students of Indira Gandhi Technical University for Women, and AI enthusiasts, game developers, and super passionate about technology for good. So thank you both for joining us. I've heard from both of you, and it was lovely to connect with both of you when we were talking to Nidhi earlier today. And I know you have some questions on behalf of the community and something you'd like to share with other students. So I'm going to hand it off to the two of you to take this interactive session forward.
Right. Thank you, Shmita, and thank you, Nidhi, for such a great session. It really made us think as students as to how impactful AI is for society and how we should be responsible in terms of building it. And, start from the beginning while in the development process to put in responsible measures in place, and how important it is for young developers to know about responsible use of AI. So thank you so much for the insights. um, we do have a few questions as students regarding it. So the first thing that I would like to know more about is, what do you think are some measures that can be implemented at a macro level to bring about some tangible change in terms of using responsible AI?
So, macro level is definitely a very, very large discussion to have. But if I am to summarize it quite simply, businesses have to understand possibly the value that they get out of including ethical AI protocols into the system from a top down approach. And there was a BCG study in 2021 that showed that about 42% of the organizations that implement RAI models in their systems do so because of business incentives. Now, business incentives qualify as brand differentiation, strong customer relationship, which then leads to higher profitability. And then there are things like improved employee retention and recruitment and culture and corporate values and things like that. So this is what businesses need to acknowledge, that in the short term, it may not look very like a lucrative idea, but later on, when there's no go and compliance comes in from the top, if I try to implement it, then the costs will be much higher and it will be a reactive approach, and not many things can be corrected there. And the second thing is, at the end user level, information literacy is what will empower every end user. Like I said, that we, the users of technology, have to understand that there are good and bad sides to it, and what the way I am using it probably has to be a very conscious involvement. So this can only be done by incorporating information literacy into curricula of schools and colleges. It can't be a good to have course. It has to literally be introduced into the curricula, as something that I personally advocate as well. Does that
Thank
answer
you.
your question? Sorry. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's another question that I want to ask. What are some difficulties do organizations face while making their products fall under the responsible AI guidelines?
Fantastic questions. You guys are putting me in a very, very important space. I'm perhaps not the most qualified person to answer this, but over my understanding in the last few years, I can summarize it to, again, three main points, which is companies are always thinking whether we should do it, when we should do it, and how we should do it. So whether we should do it needs to be addressed at a very, the corporate governance point of view, as to it does make sense profit-wise. It does make sense in long-term sustainability-wise that we need to include ethical harm protocols into how we develop technologies. So that is one challenge that most organizations are facing. And I've put it very simplistically, but it's not that easy for them to debate and arrive at the whether. When is something that I just showed in the Collingridge's dilemma stages, that, it's always cost effective to implement these protocols early on in the business stage, but it may not always be possible, right? People have priority of profits over everything else at that stage. So to be able to acknowledge that we need to implement it at some stage and putting a timeline to that is crucial. That is something that can be looked at. Third bit is how. Most of the organizations, especially in India, don't know what these protocols are. Who will educate them? Of course, there are some consultants, the big five consultants, who are informing big companies. But what about the small and medium scale companies? Who's informing them? They need to be educated about what happens, the fallouts and everything. And which is why, as part of our organization's work, we share some of the responsible technology frameworks that are globally present. But the best news is that in India, NASSCOM has just developed a responsible AI framework that is very, very expansive. It's so comprehensive. It is actually built through a multidisciplinary interaction of industry leaders, of policymakers, as well as civil society organizations. They've come together and created this framework, which any organization can apply to understand what are the questions to be asked before we implement AI into our organization. And these are the steps that we can follow to ensure that we don't have really, really bad consequences much later. So I believe these three, whether, when, and how, are the challenges that organizations are facing. I think I have a few questions for you as well. Both of you have been doing some great work, and I understand you're building a fake news detection engine. So would you like to, first of all, take us through that? Because there are lots of people here who would be keen to hear that. And secondly, since you yourself have had several layers of learning in executing this model, what do you think of introducing the RLHF model, which is, for starters, reinforcement learning from human feedback? We can get into the explanation later, but I'd like to hear what your thoughts on these are. And of course, please talk about your project.
Thank you for your question, Nidhi. We both are really passionate about the Tech for Good domain and have been participating in many hackathons for Tech for Good during the past 2 years, one of which was a Tech for Good hackathon organized by OpenWeaver and Enactus India, where we built a Hindi fake news detector. So it was our attempt to contribute to responsible use of AI, where we tackled a vernacular problem, that is Hindi fake news circulation. As we saw in your PPT, a majority of resources are spent on combating misinformation for English speaking users, whereas a very less portion of the users that are actually using those applications are English speaking. So we wanted to tackle this problem of misinformation in other languages, and especially when we come from a country like India, where the majority of the population speaks Hindi and the news gets circulated in Hindi. So there should be some measures in place to combat that as well. So that is what we wanted to tackle while using responsible AI. So I think we have a video that we could present, so you could look at our project and how we contributed to responsible AI.
Sure, yes.
So that was a brief introduction of our project. So for the entire project, we made a submission in the form of a candy kit. So this is our kit that I'm presenting on the screen right now. So what we did was the very first step that we had to take was create our own data set. Since we were working on a vernacular language, we realized that there is also a lack of data sets, not just libraries or resources, but like data sets are also unavailable in vernacular languages. So our first challenge was to create our own data set. And for that, we went to different fact check websites like Aaj Tak and Fact Check and Alt News who give Hindi fact check news. So the first step was scraping these URLs and collecting all the data that is there on these websites and analyzing that data. So after the web crawling process, we had to manually annotate each and every link. We have to for any data set to like check whether if something is fake or not fake, we had to annotate it as 1 or 0, one which says that the news is fake and 0 for saying that the news is not fake. So since the data set was we had made our own data set, we had no annotation done for that, so we had to annotate our own data set. So after using several libraries like urllib and beautiful soup, everything is available here in the candy kit that you can use. So after using those libraries for scraping our data, we manually annotated over 2000 links. So after the annotation process, another challenge that we faced was pre-processing. Now, for English, we have a lot of NLP libraries and a lot of steps can be performed for pre-processing. But for Hindi, there is a lack of libraries as well. And since there was a shortage of time because we were doing this for a hackathon, we just kept it very simple and we just removed the stop words and the punctuation marks. For the stop words, we created a list of stop words and we looked for those stop words in our data and simply removed that. And even if you're working on this project right now, you can use this code. And there are several other libraries that we explored after this project, after this hackathon. So to take this project further, we further included the Indic NLP library and several other libraries because we were working on this project further as well. So you guys can also use this kit and work further on this project. So after annotating the data and the pre-processing process, we vectorized our data and fed it to several machine learning and deep learning models, and we achieved an accuracy of 82.35%, which was great considering there was a lack of resources and a shortage of time. So this is our code, and this is a link to all the libraries and everything that we used for our project.
So, if you're also a young developer who wants to make use of responsible AI, a good place to start would be this kit itself. The great thing about tech is it is open source. You can take code off of other projects and add on to it and make changes. So you can look up our code on Candy as well and figure out what's going on there, add your own changes, and develop your version of a fake news detector. One thing that you could do was we manually annotated and scraped our data set. But if that seems like something that is very intimidating to you, you can always pick up data sets that are already available. Also, we have Twitter APIs now. The process of scraping a data set also has been very much simplified. So you can play around with the kit and use Candy to build your own projects to contribute towards responsible AI. A way that we added on to our project after the hackathon was using reinforced learning. So during the hackathon, we only used MLDL models from TensorFlow, the usual machine learning models. But to make our project more responsible, to make sure that we add a human aspect to it, that we have somebody who's there to promote cross, to keep a check on the tech aspect, we added reinforcement learning models, which basically work on human intervention. So in the deep learning model itself, there's a reward system where there are certain weights assigned with human interaction. So you, a human or somebody from the media field or somebody who has more of an idea about fake news is going to come in and improve the accuracy of the detector by providing a human perspective. So that is how you can make sure that the tech you're making is more responsible. So these models also are a great way to make sure that you're using tech that is in touch with what's happening in society. It is not basic, it is not all tech based. There is a human aspect to it that keeps it in alignment with the biases that are there in society and makes your tech relevant and good for use.
Thank you, Parul and Anmol. That was a great explanation and great work that you're doing. And I'm quite fascinated by how you have included reinforcement learning at this stage. And for those who are new to the concept, basically that means incorporating human feedback while training the model, and it's called alignment per se. And this is something that OpenAI has done with ChatGPT as well, because when you put out a beta model, it's important for the users, end users across the world, to kind of give you feedback on what's working, what's not working, and that is actual real time information that will go into addressing some of the issues that Parul also just talked about. And now that makes me really curious. And I have one more question. As really young developers and also women in technology, what exactly motivates you to work in the tech in good space, or, the responsible AI space as such?
So it is really exciting to be a developer during this time because the use of AI has just become mainstream. With ChatGPT coming in, Google Bard coming in, everybody is just rushing into this AI race. And as developers, as people who are at the forefront of this culture shift, I would say, it is our responsibilities as developers to ensure that the AI changes that are coming along are in a way which is good for everybody, which are responsible. And it falls on to us as students, as people who are going to be interacting with this AI on a bigger level in the future, to from the initial stages, from the development stages, to make sure that there is responsible use. There are these models in place where we check the accuracy of these things. So in terms of other fields as well, one way to go about it would be cross field collaboration, in which we just don't take tech people for building projects, we get people from other fields as well. One thing that we can do is, I've seen a lot of psychology projects coming up. I remember speaking to Nidhi, we spoke about a depressometer. So talking about things like depression with such light, with no psychology professional on board administering tests on psychology, is not very much in social interest. So one thing that could really aid this process along would be cross field collaboration. Even with our fake news detection project, having people who are media students or familiar with the whole circulation pipeline of news, so having somebody like that on board would really optimize our results and make sure that our tech functions for social good.
I think it's really important that we take care of how our products are impacting the society, because we always make sure that our products are sustainable these days. But I think something that is being ignored is that what is the impact of our product on the society? How is it benefiting the society? So there's something that we need to take care of, that our products are impacting the society in a positive way. So making people's life easier, impacting the society in a positive way, and making everybody included. So this feeling of having an impact on people's life in a positive way is something that keeps me motivated to work in this tech for good domain, because I'm making people's life easier. I'm developing solutions that are sustainable. I'm contributing towards people's life, making the environment better, safer. And apart from that, I'm also making people feel inclusive through my technology, because I'm not just focusing on one set of people. I'm trying to make it inclusive, and I'm trying to create a positive impact on people's life. And with so much power and with so much impact on society, I feel that this is something that I should go and work further into, because I have so much power and I should use this power to make a positive change in the society.
Fantastic. That's great to hear. I have much more faith in the future now.
Another example, I think we could talk about something that Anmol brought up the other day, was something more tangible in which you can see the use of responsible AI in production, in when people search for things like depression.
In the
So
e-commerce sector, yeah.
in the e-commerce sector, when people look for things like depression, so the AI redirects them to self-help books. So things like that being in production right from the beginning really do save on costs for business, as well as they have a positive impact on society. So that is like a great way to keep things in balance as you go forward.
Great. Thank you so much, Nidhi, Parul, and Anmol for that super interactive session. It was lovely to see Anmol and Parul, the application that you've developed with Sachet Samachar and the work that you have done to combat misinformation in the Hindi news sector. And Nidhi, it was lovely to hear from you, just the perspective and throwing light in terms of why it is so important to introduce governance and some of the issues that I think weren't even familiar about. The thing you spoke about face recognition with white male versus darker females. I think those were very interesting insights that all of us can take. So thank you all for this session, and I hope all of the viewers and our participants and students today are as motivated as all of you are and are looking forward to using this responsibility they have for good, as Anmol and Parul said, right? With great powers come great responsibility. So I think it'll be really nice to see what people take out of the session and how they can further go ahead and build on top of it and develop applications responsibly that also have a good positive social impact in society. So thank you all. Thank you, Nidhi, for your time. Very much appreciate it. And thank you, Anmol and Parul.
Thank you, Shmita. Thank you, Open Weaver team.